Hi, good people. I'm on a lazy day today, so let's talk about the commonly referred to as the Cybersecurity Act now because it's been assented to as law recently by the president. The full name of it is the Computer Misuse and Cyber Crimes Amendment Act of 2024. Of course, this act was pivotal. First of all, it is an act that was brought on the floor by the majority side of government, even though now, quote unquote, it's a bit fluid. Everyone is either in bed with the executive or, but essentially, you would say, in the broad-based government, except for a few individual members of parliament who are considered rebel MPs by their respective parties. So, the act itself actually contains some bits that are progressive and that are necessary. But like all acts which are progressive, the government did find a way to sneak in the devil in the details. And I want us to go clause by clause to check maybe the pros and cons. I would recommend that you read Bill, now the act, for yourself. And before we do that, let me just bring it to your attention that I did oppose the bill when it came on the floor. I did actually do a Facebook Live about it at some instance, and I opposed it vehemently because of a clause that I believe will be detrimental in a 360 degree manner, and that was clause 3. That was my major concern. I did recommend amendment to clause 3, but well, you know how it's like now. It didn't go through. Normally voting in parliament just happens by a simple majority because this is a regular bill, and it's either the ayes or the nays, and when the ayes have it, then the bill is considered to have passed the third critical stage and presented to the president for assenting into law. I did go through the entire stages. I wasn't a rushed bill actually. Like, it did take time to just have it like on the floor. There were various opportunities for members to debate the bill, and I have indicated that I did give my recommendations of amendments, and that is available on the Hansard for anyone who might feel that they want to take a peek or listen in the same. And normally, even when there's need for division, so you really can't see how individual members voted, because if it's a yea or nay, then there's no record of how particular members of parliament voted for the bill. And it's quite unfortunate because you would have to call for a division to get that electronic kind of voting, like what we do with the finance bill, because normally it's contentious. But I do not think that you will see a lot of that in the coming days because, like I've said, everyone is now in government. Okay, clause 2 of the bill talks about expanding definitions to include SIM swapping. We all do know the infamous Mulot SIM swap. This is actually something that is a gap that needed to be addressed by our laws and was missing, to cover emerging digital crimes in regard to virtual property frauds, identity theft, and all that. And it had not been done prior to this amendment. However, then the provision for it in the act is so broad, it could criminalize what we call, refer to as benign automation, ethical hacking. What happens, like, for example, WikiLeaks, when hackers have certain information because they believe it should be accessible to the public for decision making or to influence maybe policy development or voting on the floor of the House. And of course, expand a bit of surveillance on virtual accounts. So that is That's the mischief in this, but there's some semblance of positivity in that provision. And we come to clause 3, which is appallingly, well, crazy. I really wanted this one gone completely. Unfortunately, it did make it to the final act that was assented into law. These empowers what we call the NC4. The NC4 is like the regulatory body in regard to cybercrime coordination. It gives it the power, to take down what is being considered as harmful content on national security protection. But then it is so vague, because if you say harmful, then who decides what is harmful? What if I say that one term is harmful because the state is not pro that conversation? What if the state decides that if you share a poster calling for maybe an assembling to exercise Article 37 of the Constitution, that is harmful? They can take it down. They can take down entire websites. They can take down entire platforms, social media platforms. Like they can have a muzzle or like a shadow ban of Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, like all social media platforms that you can think of. They can be shut down entirely, in their entirety. How do you know, but I'm Kikuyu? They can be shut down. They can shut down all or particular social media platforms in their entirety. They can shut down accounts, individual accounts, NGO accounts, entities accounts, virtual assets. They can interfere with the cloud computing, shutdown, and all that, because that is what the NC4 does. The NC4 in full is the National Computer and Cybercrimes Coordination Committee, and that is the devil in the details. Like, it is the big devil in this act, that we have given the government the power to shut down people they do not agree with, or information they do not agree with, because who decides what is harmful? Of course, NC4 is government. There's no separation of powers in regard to that. So when they decide that maybe your account perpetuates an analogy that is not pro-state, then they can decide to shut it down. When they decide that maybe TikTok is a platform that is not considered to be propagating pro-government agenda, then they can decide to shut it down, and they would be acting within the law according to how we as National Assembly collectively, and allow me to use the word collectively for the generality of it, passed this act. It is very vague, because then it is very prone to abuse, and I see it being abused. We all know our government and governments, they're not able to hold themselves back when it calls for rationality and reasoning. Then you go to clause 4, which introduces new offenses for deepfake, cyberbullying, and online harassment. Yes, we are coming for you. All those quote-unquote deepfakes, distortions of voice, image, online harassment. It is in context supposed to respond to online abuse, but then I do ask myself, what about what is the definition of harmful and distress? What about political satire? What about investigative journalism? Where will it find itself? Then you go to clause 5, which expands the powers to search and seize stored data with written authority. Modernizes cyber evidence collection, give it to them. But then it also allows warrantless access to devices and data, violating Article 31 of the Constitution of Kenya. And I know that there's a legal team working on this because we have to take this to the law courts. We have to take this battle to the courtrooms now. There's no other way around it. I do think as an institution, the 13th Parliament is really incapable of such, what do I say, like holding back and just observing things from a people's perspective. Then we go to clause 6, which says extend jurisdiction to offenses committed abroad. Yeah, the people who are abroad, the Kenyan government can now request for we call extraditions. Remember what happened to Julian Assange when he had, after WikiLeaks, I think there was some time he was at the Estonia embassy, and then he was well, you're going to check the story for you. Let me not share things that I conclusively have not facts of. But I do remember that he was extradited, or there was a request for extradition. So this is what the Kenyan government is angling at. That even if you're in the USA, you're in the UK, you're in China, you're wherever you are, the government can request for you to be extradited to Kenya so that you can be charged. Grants court power to order deletion or blocking of online content on reasonable belief of unlawfulness. I do think the issue here is like the threshold of what is reasonable belief. And of course, the courts will find themselves here caught in a quagmire because there is no clear precedent in the Kenyan jurisdiction in regard to this. And of course, you have to borrow heavily from the West again. It does like also mean that if there's undue influence on the court process and procedure, then this could be like validated. It's like, quote unquote, a protection for this act. It is something that is like the way you foresee a challenge in the courtroom, and then this act actually provides express powers for the courts to order takedown of content that is deemed to be unlawful and at the full discretion of the court. Of course, there's clause 8, which is increasing the fines and prison terms. Of course, harsh penalties, for these deter cybercrime and reinforces deterrence. Now, harsh penalties are not an issue or a major concern unless and until they're abused, because let's say like a capital offense like murder has harsh sentences. We don't complain about it because unless that is abused to politicize it or maybe to criminalize it in a way that people do not get justice, then that is in itself an illegality. And of course, there's the rationale behind it is deterrence, to deter any potential offenders. And there's clause 9, which allows the Interior CS to designate critical information infrastructure and impose compliance obligations, apparently supposed to protect essential digital systems and national security infrastructure. But then it is a blanket designation covering media houses, NGOs, independent thought organization groups, individual, and this could be used against them by the government or abused. So that is the act. I recommend that you read it for yourself. I've told you, for me, the big mischief is clause 3, which I believe is just preposterous. I can't believe that we did not amend that. And I have also said there's a team of lawyers who I believe are working to challenge this in court. So collectively, let us also be reminded of our civic duty to follow proceedings in Parliament and communicate to our respective members of Parliament in regard to proceedings and how we would want to be represented. So guys, this, I want to clarify, is not a call to action on the streets. I don't, on the line of thought, I'm not the kind of leader who sees that democracy must be challenged on the streets. I've been engaged in demos myself back when I was in uni, and a few times just to put pressure on respective authorities I do think that at this point, when we've lost so many young people, I do think it's prudent that we think about how we are going to register as voters, as young people, so that we can have a regime change, hopefully to a better one, in 2027. So, goodbye guys, that's all.